Andrew was never easy to catch up with because his main goal in life was to get back into a serious relationship. For the first time in my life, I had met a man that 100% embodied the women in my family's obsession with being with someone. I met him after he was left by his partner of 7 years. Shocked, he escaped to a new country and was trying to find a new life immediately to replace the old one that left him. I cannot blame him because, in some ways, I wanted the same. I just did not have a strategy. I was fascinated by Andrew's focus and determination to just be with someone because I just never chased. But I did do the chasing for anyone or anything that A, did not like me, or B, I did not want. I often found that my ability to manifest was powerful. The problem is, I had no requirements. I just wanted people, and found that strange result of being raised to be super independent had turned me into oddly codependent in relationships. It is why I was fascinated by Andrew. He was desperate to find someone and not be alone, and his strategy was based on pure stamina, slightly low standards, and consistency. I was taking notes for myself because one bad date had me off the apps for years. And then I see it, he said, shocked and wide eyed. We had finally met up, and he was telling me about his life, which I cannot say was too self absorbed of him. Most of my friends vent to me, but I do not vent, or at least very rarely. And it means I super trust you, or I'm so overwhelmed in my head that I tell anyone. That latter one gets me more trouble than I'd like. It's all moving down there. What is? I said, slightly horrified. Unless he was dating the alien in Alien versus Predator. Why were body parts moving from the inside? The worms, he yelped in betrayal and disgust. If there's one thing I have learned about the gay scene is that it is super cliquish, can be very judgmental of looks, and surprisingly misogynistic until you realize these are men that love men. Where's the woman part? Still, when we got together, we would laugh. And because of my childhood, I always assumed if someone laughed with me or trauma dumped on me, it meant they liked me and we were close. In perspective, it's deranged, especially with the speed of how people trauma dump. To Andrew, I could be a diary, but even those got tossed away. Not the ballworms, I said, not reading the genuine fear, slash in homage to Katya and T.S. Madison. No, they're anal, he said, confused. Right, I got that. What do I do? He said, concerned while also aware of what he had to do. He was ready to pull out those worms like a garden because he really liked this guy. They liked the same movies, same places, and same ideas. And if there was one thing Andrew could do, is date himself and fall hard. You leave him, I said obviously, and slightly shocked that Andrew was contemplating, but realizing here's the difference. We both may like men, but I'm a woman, and there's way more danger and even disgust thrown on my body than his. When you cross my scene of gal pals and girlfriends, they all have stories of the condom left in them, the STD that they had to take out because their partner of the STD they had tested because their partner of 3 years was cheating on them the whole time, the violent, strange acts even husbands would do without consent, the pregnancies that went terribly wrong with the wrong guy. A woman's body was a landscape for male wounding as much as it was her temple. And we were becoming cutthroat on who was allowed entry, realizing that casual sex was not so casual if pain was usually more handed than pleasure. Hence, Andrew's wondering if he was exaggerating shocked me as a woman, but also awakened me as a friend. Lucia was always messaging him, and the man was good for reading texts and not responding. Yet I was reaching out to Lucia and never got a response. We were all in a game of telephone, and I was noticing that if a friend does not mind maintaining contact with a man filled with ass worms, but can ghost you, they're not your friend. I don't want to leave him. I really like him, he declared somberly. We have a lot in common, including your face, I smiled. Twinning was a thing in the gay community, slash Andrew's desires. He smiled and said, but I have to. Then his eyes trailed, and I began to realize he had been seen with this guy a lot, who knew of his condition and how much gossip had been spread about him with this guy. Within seconds, I was helping him write a breakup text and beginning to realize my attempt to change how much people disregard me had failed. I was still after people that were after buttworms. All right, let's discuss. Let's heal. So, I I really want to make sure I don't sex shame anybody because that's the thing about being a woman in particular. We have stories and we have stories that leave us with shame and that leave us with embarrassment. And I think we live in a culture that has promoted casual sex as if it's actually casual, but there are always dangers to sex. There's STDs for us, there's pregnancy and violence and even death. And I think for us, it's harder to understand the casualness of it because our pleasure is often not even considered. There are many men who just don't know women's bodies, don't consider women's bodies, or even think that if they get pleasure, we get pleasure. And it's just not that way. And what shocked me with Andrew was he really was trying to figure out how to keep this guy who, because of bare minimum things like we laugh and we love sci-fi movies and we share the same taste in music. And I think what impacted me about Andrew was two things. The first is I'm always fascinated by people that are constantly hunting for relationships because I don't hunt, but that doesn't make me a saint. Because the other part is that I try to, like, if you knock on my door, I let you in, right? I run on that mentality, and I've talked about that before, and that's not exactly helpful either. I Anybody can knock, and this idea that if you show interest in me, let's let's love and let's have a relationship is horrible. And I find that I manifest partners, but I don't really have requirements. I'm like, please bring me someone, and then it's like, okay, an animal. Well, no, animals are nicer. It's a man, and I was asking for the bear. um, but so I was like, I'm like, do you not know you're unsafe? I just couldn't believe it, and we had like this back and forth. That in perspective, I don't have good friendships with people that are obsessed with relationships. But I always am fascinated by them. And the friendships eventually combust because people who are obsessed with their relationships make their identity their relationship. And that's what he did. And that's what he always did and will always do. And there's something that pulls me to them because I never did that for how people pleasing and how servile I was, oddly enough. I think my relationships ultimately ended because I felt too erased. It's almost like I have so much to give to someone, and I can last giving them all of me or so much of me. And then there comes this point, this existential crisis that it could take years to get to, where I realize I'm kind of a little empty. I'm not getting anything from this. The mist of giving is receiving is absolutely fading. And that's where I realize, Andrew, he gets, I think with women, we're surprised when gay men are misogynistic. But I even said it, like, they're men who love men. Why wouldn't they be misogynistic? All we share in common is that we love men. They're it's not a big enough glue to not realize that somebody can still be prejudiced against you, even your own family, as you see with Daddy Recovery. My dad, like, they could have prejudices against you. Anybody can. And I think we let our guard down, and then there are these moments where you're like, oh, we're building a genuine friendship off of image. No wonder the veil dropped. And I think with Andrew, he became the gay friend of the group, and uh, all these ladies chasing him, ironically, like Lucia, and he was just ghosting, gone. He wanted. In an upcoming episode, I talk about we had this incident where he said, basically, I want white men in foreign countries, like whitesicans or something. And it was this moment where the group had this, I think you said something really horrible, but because we always say you're nice and harmless, we're not going to go into that. And I have a real struggle with nice people because I could always tell they're being fake. And I don't judge people for being fake, it's a survival mechanism. But it's strange when you see somebody doing what you genuinely are and doing it as a tactic, as a strategy to get ahead and network and see who can give them something. And meanwhile, you're struggling to see whether that part of you has ever given you anything and should even still be a part of you. Because I'm a genuinely kind person, and I hate sometimes my kindness. I don't, it's a struggle for me to wield it because it was the first thing that was so used against me. My family deemed me sweet. And if I was anything less than sweet, I was punished or judged or dismissed. I had to be so kind all the time and so complimentary, so loving. And it was my nature. And I liked that part of my nature until I got older. Like I think around my teen years is when I started to wake up that there's something really off about this obsession with me holding everybody and I never get held. And that's why I say like I think there's a part of my nature, and I wrote about it recently in an episode that's coming, that is just like I've never seen anything like it. I walk on the streets and everybody who's lost turns to me. Every homeless man asks me for money. I sit down and within seconds somebody will sit next to me crying about the, their and the episode. I sat down and this woman came up to me and just started talking about how she lost her brother in Vietnam and all this stuff. And I was like, I obviously comforted her and heard her, but it dumbfounds me how people just see me and know I can tell this girl my pain. And they can. They absolutely can. And I think my journey is trying to figure out if that's good, if that's bad, particularly because for a while I became Andrew's diary, his log on his dates and his existentialism. And then when he found a partner, he was out. But I don't, and I think that's where my crux is. My father would tell me every sad thing he felt, how much he hated his other family, how much he hated himself. And I would comfort him. And I thought that was love. Even though he was abusing me, even though he was tearing me down, I thought if he's telling me everything that makes him feel bad and looking at me, even as a child, not only his child, a child to comfort him, it must mean he cares or he sees me as comforting. And if he sees me as comforting, he sees me as love. But when you're selfish and self centered, no, you don't. Like you just see it as I need comfort. Can you give it? And that's something that, which is again why I don't. Yes, Andrew was self centered. Yes, he was misogynistic. Yes, he was self absorbed. But I don't know the difference sometimes between this superpower I have of people venting to me when they really need to versus this weakness I have of thinking that because they did that, they actually love me and they actually like me. And so we had this back and forth, and he was very testy, very moody. He always loved to be right. Ultimately, he concludes he has to leave this person. I help him write a nice text, breakup DM. And as we were, obviously when you're doing that, you erase it 20 times. But it hit me, this is a person who can't write back to me. And here we are trying to hold care, tenderness towards the heart of a man who has butt worms and doesn't say it and is just going around starting relationships. Because I think the worms were old. Um, ah, I'm so sorry. It's not funny because, things happen. I think we shouldn't shame people. I laugh at us. This, I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes I look at me and in perspective, I held way too much respect and care for people that were treating me for dumb or treating me badly or just it didn't even matter. Like why was I it wasn't that serious for how serious I was being. And I always laugh at it because there's just something so ridiculous to humanity. You hear this person betray you with a very serious STD. You don't want that. And we were like erasing, rewriting, talking out loud about what we should say. And meanwhile, ultimately, it was like four sentences, not even four DM sentences. So, they're really small. And I think it hit me. I'm I'm giving way too much importance and love to just anyone. And that's why I try to handle with care what I'm saying to everybody, including myself, because I don't want to come off like this crazy stalker or this person, but I am somebody who takes things deeply. And I think I take things deeply because, like I said, I was raised so independent that there was this part of me that when I approached school or I approached jobs or I approached this life, I was looking for a family. I look in my friends for a family. And my mother did that. Like her friends are her sisters. And I haven't had the same luck of finding my sisters, right? So I really go in if I like you and I think you like me or I see you have interest in me. I I'm going for deep connections. But my assessment of deep connections is off because people trauma dump anywhere, anytime, o'clock. And that to me is like, oh, you're giving me your pain. You must be giving me your heart. And I think with Andrew, for a while, I thought we're being friends. And I, that was a moment in my head where this is somebody who's handling with a lot of care somebody who didn't handle him. And you have to notice that. You have to notice who the people you're caring about are caring about. Because if it's not you, they don't care about you. And that's it. It really is that black and white. And I say that because my father, one of his manipulation tactics was I really hate my other family, but I buy them everything and I network for them. And he didn't do that for me. So I felt like here he is telling me I hate these people and I feel confined with how I have to work with for them. Because I really think ultimately my father's dream life was two things. I think he obviously wanted to stay with my mom, but I think there was a part of him that really wished he never had kids and even never had married. Like, I wish I could have stayed a hoe, snorted half the world, and become this supermassive lawyer. Like, he got so confined to really serious things at a young age, like family, like having kids, like having to work for those kids, that all that was dark about him, he just dumped on children, his children, particularly me. And acknowledging that he didn't want those things that he had would make him look bad. But what he did to those things that he had made him look worse.